Hello, everybody, and welcome. I am Bricker Boom, and today we're doing something a little bit different, mostly because I am awful at time management. We're going to be taking every single challenge run that I have done as of so far, Nuzlocke included, and putting them into a tier list, basically based off of difficulties. So if it's S tier, it was a pretty easy run, all the way down to the D tier, meaning I will hopefully never have to do it again unless it gets, popular somehow, because then I have to. So, starting out with Absol, I would say Absol was mild difficulty. Overall, Absol is a pretty solid Pokemon. It's got pretty solid stats overall. Um, all of these are in my Pokemon Challenge playlist, by the way, so if you are wanting to take a look at some of these, by all means, please do. We have the Venomoth run that I did in Pokemon Heart Gold. That was actually pretty difficult. The main issue that I had was the red fight. It took me 153 tries before I finally beat that particular area. Overall, Venomoth definitely earned a lot of respect that day, but it was still a very difficult run. We have the Plusle and Minun run, and that I will never do again if I can help it. Part in due to the fact that my thumbnails were horrid at that time, but also it was just a very difficult battle. More often than not, the only way that you could actually get further within the game was to level them up. We went and found extra move sets, moves that would work for them, and Plusle and Minun are just bad Pokemon overall. Hitmonlee, the Kicking Fiend. I don't remember having too much difficulty with that particular run, mostly because the fact that dark types run rampant in that game, and as long as you have a strong fighting move, you're basically going to be able to take them down. Now, I do want to preface that I haven't watched any of these videos since they dropped, so I could just be remembering things differently, but I do not believe that it was that bad of a run. There were some places here and there, like Winona's Gym, I'm sure gave me some trouble, but I remember Meditate and kicking as much as I could. My Aerodactyl only run, I would say mild difficulty. Misty having Water Pulse definitely doesn't help, but also Aerodactyl just doesn't really have that great of a moveset. That was when somebody did actually end up commenting on the video saying, hey, you need to work on your editing in regards to making sure that the fights line up with the audio being presented, and I started making adjustments after that day. So, random YouTube comment. Thank you. It did not go unnoticed. My Metronome run. Never again. That was awful because I decided to make it so every single Pokemon had the move Metronome. So more often than not, it was just hoping and praying that the luck would line up. Sometimes it did. More often than not, it did not. It took me a long time to get past that particular run, and if I remember right, it was almost 80 in-game hours just trying to get the luck to line up properly. Ammonite. Little difficulty. The good news is with the fossil Pokemon especially, they have access to ice moves, so Lance isn't going to be a problem. They have access to water moves, which takes care of Giovanni and Blaine in the late game. The only downfall that they have is that they're a bit slow, but they get cool abilities like Shell Armor, so you don't really get punished too often. My Butterfree and Beedrill run. That, I'm gonna say is the top of C tier, pretty difficult, because the problem is they are bugs. But they also, you know what, actually, I'm gonna go to the bottom of mild difficulty, because they are bug Pokemon. However, the fact that Butterfree has access to Sleep Powder, and Sleep is a pretty overpowered move, even by Gen 3 standards, it's still pretty good. I remember having a couple difficulties here and there, but for the most part, I thought that it was pretty easy. The Chikorita run. Now, I'm putting this in the never again tier. However, I think I'm gonna need some redemption on that. A lot of people seem to think that I would still be able to beat Pokemon Fire Red if I use the right moveset on Chikorita. I did off camera, but maybe with a better nature or something. The main issue that I had was Agatha. Once it got to her particular ghost Pokemon and them double teaming, I just couldn't hit them. And Chikorita doesn't, and it could be because it is Pokemon Fire Red rather than Heart Gold. Chikorita doesn't have that big of a move set to actually be able to hit these ghost Pokemon, and grass moves aren't very effective on them because they're part poison. Kabuto. It's going to go into the same tier. It was a lot of fun. I have a soft spot for the fossil Pokemon. I'm actually going to put it at the very top. By this time, you can kind of tell that I'm learning how to do thumbnails. I know that these images aren't the easiest to figure out, but a lot of the Pokemon are kind of centered in on it, and I am going to continue to say which one is which, this way you know. But again, if you are interested in seeing any of these, just check out the playlist. Also, make sure to go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel. Likes boost the video in the algorithm, and subscribing means that you can see more of my videos. Not necessarily my face all the time, but this is a rare occasion because I am behind on everything. Articuno, probably the easiest of the legendary bird run that I did. The reason being is because, again, ice. Ice moves, despite ice Pokemon being kind of bad, ice moves are very much needed in the first game because you've got Pokemon like Dragonite, 2 Dragonairs, you have 2 Onix from Bruno. If you're a part ice type, it means that you're not going to be taking full damage from Lorelei. Like, there's a lot of good reasons to do this. Swampert. Swampert, I would say low difficulty because Swampert has the unique typing of being both ground and water, which means that Watson is not at all an issue in any type of water run. He's a lifesaver and a Nuzlocke. Like, there's just a lot of really good things about him. Gengar only run. Definitely going into the S tier, Gengar is a very solid Pokemon overall. He's fast, he hits hard, he can learn a pretty wide variety of moves. Overall, I had a lot of fun with this particular run. Mr. Mime. Psychic Pokemon are always going to be busted, especially in Gen 1. Mr. Mime was a little bit tankier than what I thought it would be. And it was a lot more fun. It also learned a unique variety of moves like Magical Leaf. More often than not, I would never suspect a Psychic/Fairy typing to learn this move to be able to use in combat, but it turned out to be pretty valuable throughout the entirety of the run. And then we follow it up with Execute. I think it was pretty difficult overall because you start off with moves like Barrage, which is horribly inaccurate, doesn't really do much damage. Then you also have moves like Hypnosis, which is horribly inaccurate. And overall, once you get past a certain point and you get access to things like Psychic, the game definitely becomes easier. But once you get past Misty, it becomes quite difficult. And if I remember right, you don't really learn that many powerful grass moves. So it's possible that even Misty was harder than I'm remembering because it would resist any Psychic moves we have. So just a decent Pokemon, but for the most part, it definitely needs a fine-tuning with its moveset. Espeon. I would say Espeon somewhere falls into the middle of A tier in regards to my runs. Again, Psychic Pokemon are going to be very solid. Espeon is known to be a little bit of a tank. There are some matchups that just doesn't go well into it, but for the most part, I feel like there was very little difficulty when it did come to the Espeon run. Jolteon, a shocking good run. Mild difficulty, mostly due to the fact that Giovanni was a thing. Rock moves were always going to be very hard hitting, and just the fact that Jolteon doesn't learn the widest variety of moves that you would necessarily need to get past certain hurdles. It was still a lot of fun, but there were definitely some issues. My Magikarp run, easy. I don't know why people have issues with Magikarp runs. It was the easiest run that I've probably ever did. But the reason that it was the easiest that I've ever did is because we gave it stats of a Mewtwo and then gave it a fighting type like Machamp. It was a April Fool's joke video. I really enjoyed it. I know that the game, at least the older ones, can be beat with Magikarp using items. I just don't feel like doing that yet. Maybe one day, but today is not that day. Lickitung. I don't really remember the Lickitung video. I know that I did it for a Horde Quarters charity event reward, but I don't think I remember it all that well. I remember that Lickitung has pretty good access to different moves. The stats aren't horrible. If I had to guess, I probably hit a little bit of a roadblock. If I had to guess, I probably hit a little bit of a roadblock against Bruno, just given the fact that it has Cross Chop. There have been so many runs that I have done where Cross Chop has just absolutely annihilated me, and y'all, it feels bad losing to Bruno. Ghastly. Another run that was a lot of fun. The only issue with Ghastly, very little difficulty overall, probably the highest of A tier. The only issue that you end up finding with these particular runs is the fact that by the end of it, they are first form Pokemon, and first form Pokemon are going to end up being a little bit worse than your fully evolved form Pokemon, obviously. Alakazam, and I would say Alakazam is right below the legendary Pokemon. I mean, it's an Alakazam in Gen 1. Granted, it has been slightly nerfed, if that even is the right term for it, because critical hits aren't based off of speed anymore, but it's still incredibly fast and incredibly powerful. Dustox and Beautifly. If I am remembering correctly, this was a fairly difficult run because we had an issue of, if I'm remembering right, it's been a little while, Dustox could at least tank a hit, Beautifly could not. I want to say that I used Beautifly to inflict some sort of status powder of some kind, and then that was basically its only use. Glaceon. This was actually a somewhat difficult run, just because ice types are not very well utilized in most gens. We didn't have any issue with Lance, we didn't have any issue with Brock or Giovanni, but people like Blaine, and if I'm remembering correctly, Koga, were able to wreck us. Pikachu in Pokemon Fire Red. Listen, I know, I am well aware that Pikachu is the mascot of the series, and that's why I have no problem saying that Pikachu is awful. When you go up against Brock, you have nothing that can do super effective damage to it. You get to Misty, cool. Then you go right back into doing neutral damage for 2 gyms, and then after that you go to Koga, who is bulky, and Pikachu is not dealing very hard blows. It was a very difficult run from start to finish. Slowpoke. The main issue that I had with Slowpoke is in the name. It was a very slow Pokemon. When you're a slow Pokemon and you're tanking super effective hits, it does not take much for you to go down. It wasn't the hardest run that I've ever done, but it was still pretty difficult. I will definitely end up doing a slow bro run soon. Slowpoke is a solid Pokemon overall, but yeah, it was definitely rough. Zapdos only. Little difficulty, and I know that that's gonna sound like a little bit of a hot take. However, hear me out. With Zapdos, especially when you go to the first gym, you are 4 times weak against Rock Tomb, and even though it is inaccurate, it's still probably going to end up landing. When you first go to Brock at that time, you also don't have very many moves that are super effective against him. Mid-game, not too bad. But then towards the end game again, you have Giovanni, 2 Onyx from Bruno's team. The good news is by the time you get that far, you hopefully have a couple moves, but overall it's actually a pretty difficult run. Not difficult in any lower of a tier because it is still a legendary, but in comparison to any other legendary that you can play with, yeah, it's actually pretty hard. Flareon, and I remember the Flameo Hotman thumbnail that I made. Flareon, if I remember right, there was some mild difficulty. Mostly, I would still say above Jolteon and Glaceon, simply due to the fact that the first 2 gyms are very difficult for you, but then after that you're pretty alright. Until you get to gyms 7 and 8. The good news is, depending on the ability you roll, you shouldn't have too much of an issue in gym 7, but 8 can definitely be a bit of a brick wall. Umbreon. I remember Umbreon being a little bit more difficult than Espeon, but not too bad. The good news is, with people like Sabrina, you have 0 worries whatsoever. Moltres. Moltres, I would say, belongs into the S tier as well in regards to somewhat easy runs. Moltres has a little bit more access to a move pool than what I feel like Zapdos does. And also, while it is 4 times effective for the first 2 you know what, actually, because of the fact that it's 4 times effective, I'm going to move it above Zapdos, but I am going to go ahead and place it into the A tier because you've got 2 gyms back-to-back, technically 3 gyms back-to-back-to-back, that it has some sort of weakness against, so yeah, it probably didn't do too well. Mew. Mew is going to go into the top of the tier list and probably won't be dethroned. Mew was a lot of fun. The fact that it can learn every single HM, TM, etc., it's a very solid Pokemon. If I remember right, I had an easier time beating the game with Mew than what I did with Mewtwo. While the stats are definitely lower, the access to a wider variety of moves than what Mewtwo has definitely proved to be very solid. Poliwrath. I actually just did this video not too long ago. Poliwrath was fine. The problem with Poliwrath is that it doesn't have much of a special attack to go off of. It can still knock out a lot of Pokemon in one hit, just like any others. I mean, unfortunately with these solo runs, more often than not, you are going to have to level up the Pokemon quite a bit. This one is no different. If I remember right, from a few weeks ago, I mostly just struggled around the time of the Elite Four. Other than that, not too bad. Lunatone and Solrock. I'm going to say that that was a fairly easy run, bridging on to potentially being a little bit difficult. The cool thing is with Solrock and Lunatone, they have access to fire moves, psychic moves. They can help each other out in a duo battle. I actually really enjoyed those. I've actually been thinking about doing a Claydol and Xatu run, just to say that I've done the games with Tate and Liza's full team. I haven't done that yet, but it's something that I think I'm going to work on soon. Vaporeon, and I don't want to hear it. Either way, it's going to go into the S tier. At the end of the day, it's a bulky Pokemon for not the reasons that the internet seems to think. It can learn a wide variety of moves. It's actually... Before the internet got its claws into this Pokemon, it was one of my favorites, and I have no regrets. Y'all are nasty. My Emerald Nuzlocke. Actually, you know what? Not very difficult at all. The good news is, yes, it is a game covered entirely way too much in water. However, if you take Mudkip as a starter, you're pretty much going to be set, especially for... Watson is one of the hardest fights in a Nuzlocke for this, and as long as you have Mudkip as a starter, it's a breeze. There's plenty of encounters to be able to keep you going. Overall, I highly recommend this particular Pokemon game. as a Nuzlocke starter. Maybe not over Fire Red, but still very, very fun. Highly recommended. Nidoqueen. I would say somewhere around here. Nidoqueen doesn't have as high of an attack stat as Nidoking, and therefore, in a solo run aspect, it can be a little rocky. However, she is able to take a little bit more damage than what Nidoking can. For that, I think this is a pretty fair placement. The Jynx run. Psychic types are always going to be good. That's the problem. Like, if I remember right, I released this right around Christmas time. This was in my videos were taking a little bit of a dip, and I was dealing with some mental health issues from that. But overall, I feel like I remember this particular run being somewhat easy. There are a few tricky parts, as there are with any Pokemon, especially given the fact that Jynx is slow and can be hit pretty hard by a physical Pokemon. There were more than enough knockouts, but for the most part, Jynx was pretty solid. I would say Miltank is mild difficulty, and I am going to move it to the bottom of that tier, because it does come pretty difficult. Partially because this is a gym that it wasn't supposed to be in. That always causes things to be a little bit wonky, but for the most part, it was a solid Pokemon. It has a wide access to moves. The only issue that I really had with it was Agatha, because Scrappy wasn't yet introduced. The good news is you can learn enough moves by then via TM to make it so you don't have to worry too much. But for the most part, it was a fun run. It just had its moments. Oh, and Bruno absolutely annihilated us time and time again. It was great. Nidoking. I'm going to put at the bottom of A tier because the problem with the Nidoking and Nidoqueen line is honestly just due to the fact that they're a one-trick pony. Nidoking is supposed to be hard-hitting and then get out of there pretty much as quickly as possible, while Nidoqueen is meant to tank a few more hits. Overall, I don't think that it was too bad, but there were a few moments here and there. Let's see, the Pokemon Poison Nuzlocke. I didn't finish this one. I ended up wiping. I would say that it's pretty difficult because here's the reason why. You've got poison Pokemon, some of which are going to be weak to Giovanni. Venusaur is going to be your main starter, which is weak to Blaine. Then you've got Sabrina, who is probably going to be able to outspeed most of them. I'm pretty sure by the grace of God and Speed IVs, my Beedrill was able to outspeed. It may have still ended up getting KO'd, I truthfully don't remember. But for the most part, poison types are very difficult to use in a Nuzlocke. I had a lot of fun with it, and I recommend you check it out, but I'm going to recommend that you check out all of these videos, because your boy needs the watch hours. Poliwag. Poliwag, I'm also going to go ahead and put into the mild difficult, or the pretty difficult tier. It's a first form Pokemon. It's got a pretty good speed stat, but the problem is, once you get towards the end of the game, you're not going to be one-shotting much of anything. Relicanth, definitely Relican. Please don't leave me. Relicanth was a really fun run. It was just a random idea that I had to bring another fossilized Pokemon into the game because of how well the other fossil Pokemon performed. It was my second video long form ever to hit over 1,000 views, so it definitely has a special place in my heart. It is a slow Pokemon, but it's bulky enough that doesn't really cause too much of a detriment to it. But it can also learn water and ice moves, and normal moves, and rock moves. It's got a surprising wide variety of moves that it has access to. Walrein. I'm gonna be honest, I have kind of blocked this one out of my head. Not for any particular bad reason for the Pokemon, but just because of mental health at the time. I don't think that I had too much trouble, but I think that there were some parts here and there because it is a water Pokemon in a game surrounded by water. So there is that. Gible. Never again. As much as I love and appreciate the fact that Madrybread actually retweeted this particular challenge because somebody who shall not be named, Ronifero, decided to tag him saying, hey, he made a video of this because he saw that you made it. And that I absolutely cherish. Gible is rough as a Pokemon to use in Pokemon Platinum. There are so many gyms he gets walled by. Even at level 100, there are still so many areas that I struggled in. Gyarados. I remember this as if it happened too long ago. This was an okay run. The main issue is the fact that with with a Pokemon that has Intimidate, you're essentially intimidating the weakest of the opponent's Pokemon, so you don't really get to make good use of its actual ability. In a Nuzlocke, it's great, because you can constantly be switching in and out. But in a solo run, it's not the best. It doesn't have a very high special attack. It can still land some decent special hits, but for the most part, it's a physical attacker. And there aren't very many physical water moves in that gym that actually allow you to take advantage of that. So that's why it has that. Tauros. Tauros is fast and hits like a freight train. The only issue is that its special is so poor, it might as well just be tickling the other Pokemon if it tries to use any of it. There are some parts of that particular run that will definitely cause some issues. For the most part, it was still a lot of fun, but I do remember running into a couple roadblocks. The Team Rocket run, I was actually surprised that this one didn't do better in the good old algorithm, but in regards to a fun run, I loved it. Weezing and Arbok, and I didn't get Meowth because who needs a Meowth if you have a Weezing and Arbok? It was basically a do-over of the Pokemon Poison Nuzlocke that I had done. It was a lot of fun. You're still going to run into quite a few problems, so I don't know why I put it into the easy run territory. I would say little difficulty, probably somewhere around the middle. But those two Pokemon, despite everybody saying that they're bad, are actually pretty decent. Water Nuzlocke, little difficulty. Because the thing is, you get past the first gym, and you're fine. You go up against Misty, and by then you have a Wartortle that probably knows Bite. If you trained up your Magikarp that you buy from the Fisherman, you now have a Gyarados that also knows Bite. And then you can also get Starmie that's able to learn a wide variety of TMs. As long as encounter rates are in your favor, you should have zero problems doing this. And then, funny enough, a Starmie run, I would say probably right around here. It has a crazy amount of TMs that it can learn. So once you get past the first few gyms, Lieutenant Surge is going to be the hardest that you run into. But once you get past the first few gyms, it's smooth sailing because you get access to Psychic, Ice Beam, Recover if you need it, Surf. You basically cover all movesets that you're going to need from now until eternity. And for some reason, it can learn Thunderbolt, so you're good. Metagross. I mean, it's a Metagross. This was the first video to actually get over 1,000 views. It wasn't very hard. The main thing that you have to basically do is click A and wait for Meteor Mash to connect, and as long as it connects, you're good to go. It's a lot of fun, but yeah. Arcanine and Heart Gold. I had a lot of fun with this run. I don't remember if I got past Red, but I remember it being somewhat difficult. Arcanine, overall, if you evolve your Growlithe into Arcanine too early, it doesn't have the best moveset. But for the most part, it was a lot of fun. I like the fact that I was able to use moves like Extreme Speed, Flamethrower, and actually get the stab bonus. Like, there were a lot of really cool things about it. The Pokemon Heart Gold Baby Run. Bottom of C tier. There are some actually pretty solid baby Pokemon, like Togepi with Ancient Power and Serene Grace. Magby is pretty solid. Elekid isn't too bad. But then you have some stinkers like Pichu. I don't feel like Tyrogue pulled its weight very well in this particular run. It was very difficult, and it but it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this run. I started getting a little bit more comfortable with thumbnails. I named every single baby Pokemon after a member of the community. But yeah, just it's very difficult, but it's very rewarding. Almost like being a parent. Heracross only. Honestly, Heracross did quite well up until about the point that I got to Red. I was not able to beat Red with a single Heracross. It does insanely well, though. About the only part that I think that I struggled with was Falconer, and that's because he has flying types. But for the most part, Heracross is very solid. Houndour. Houndour, I would say, goes into mild difficulty because with Fire Red Leaf Green, yeah, you now have Bite and Crunch and things like that that are updated to be Dark moves, but they didn't really know what they were doing with Dark Pokemon still, so you don't have as wide of a move variety as you may think. It's still a lot of fun, and I got to use a Mean Girls quote for the thumbnail, so I can't complain too much, but there were some difficult points here and there. Dragonite. I had a lot of fun with this thumbnail because it definitely did kind of bring me back to the anime. But it was a pretty easy run overall because you get to learn things like Outrage. The main thing is just making sure that you don't smack yourself. You're probably going to go down quite a bit if you get bad Confusion luck, as I typically do. But for the most part, it's a pretty solid run. Furret, I will say, is pretty difficult. The problem with Furret is that it stalls out very quickly in these particular runs. It's not the most powerful Pokemon. It can learn a pretty decent variety of moves, so there are going to be parts that you're able to breeze by, but again, it's a Furret. I can't remember if I beat Red with it or not. You'll just have to watch a video to find out, but it was a very difficult run. Stantler and Girafarig, because I wanted to do a Christmas run. I'm gonna say mild difficulty, because here's the thing. You find a Pokemon that has psychic powers right before you get into the Ghost Gym, and this particular Ghost Trainer decides that he's going to be hauling in Pokemon that are from Gen 1 that have both Ghost and Poison type, meaning that it's probably going to be a pretty easy knockout. There are a lot of parts in this game that you may struggle, but it's still a psychic Pokemon. You're probably going to be fine. Growlithe, Late Night Candy, if you were watching this, I'm sorry, but it was a pretty difficult run. You have the goodest boy doing his goodest. However, you go up against Brock, then Misty, and then you have a little bit of a break. You have a pretty good break for a while. But the problem is, once again, Koga, quite tanky. Sabrina, very fast, able to knock out the poor doggo. Blaine, can't do much against him. Giovanni, horrible, sorry. Lorelei, also able to annihilate you. Most of Bruno's Pokemon, also able to annihilate you. Lance's Aerodactyl, also, you see where I'm going with this. The only reason that it's in the never again tier is because it's a Growlithe. It's still a solid enough Pokemon. Snorlax. There were some issues. I hope you like the Give Apple Do Crime. Credit to Akio Ari for making this particular thing. It's a Pokemon Snap callback to the new Pokemon Snap. I would say little difficulty. He has an insane variety of moves that are available to him. You're going to run into some issues with people like Bruno because Machamp is absolutely going to outspeed and cross-chop you into oblivion, but sooner or later, that move's going to miss. Garchomp. Garchomp was honestly a lot of fun. I mostly did that because I did the Gible run. I wanted to see how the other half of it performs. Pokemon Platinum is a very long game, and having a Pokemon that can actually one-shot a lot of things makes it not so rough anymore. Pokemon Platinum Rotom only, another video that I don't think too many people ended up seeing, but hopefully, we're getting close to the end of this video. Hopefully, y'all decide to go back and take a look at some of these, because I'm trying not to give too many spoilers. I'm just trying to give an overall arc of what the run looked like. But the Pokemon Platinum Rotom only run, I made it so I couldn't use any of the other forms, but honestly, Electric Ghost was a very solid type. You do run into some fairly difficult moments, but for the most part, I think your typing is what saves you from getting absolutely rolled the entire time. 10 out of 10 would definitely recommend. My Goodra run, honestly, despite it being a Goodra, pretty difficult. In my personal opinion, and take this with a grain of salt, I want to say the Goodra is probably one of the weakest pseudo-legendaries, in my opinion. It's a very slow Pokemon. It takes forever and a day to evolve, and I think it has to level up while it's also raining, or there's some sort of stipulation that I remember smacking myself because I had to go back and finally get the Goodra that way. It had its moments, though. I want to say I had to be close to 100 to actually be able to beat it, but it's also been quite some time since I've done this run. This was a long time ago, did it for a friend. My Spook Lock. The Spook Lock was actually a lot of fun. There wasn't a whole lot of difficulty to it because I did turn off the caps to make it so my Haunter could evolve into a Gengar, but it was using mostly spooky Pokemon. The main reason that I really enjoyed this particular video is because it allowed me to flex my writing chops. I feel like I've gotten a lot better at writing scripts since October when this came out, but it's always something that I'd like to practice, and I'll probably end up doing it again, just maybe in a different game. I haven't completely decided. And then last, because I did get rid of some of the starter thumbnails, these are all pulled directly from my photo archive that I have kept. I'll kind of cover the starters here in a moment, but this was the Pokemon Stadium, beating Pokemon Fire Red using Pokemon Stadium moves. It's somewhere between mild and little difficulty. I will say mild because unfortunately, some of the moves that you want to use just do not exist in any way, shape, or form in this particular game because they did a pretty big overhaul between Pokemon Stadium 1 and Pokemon Fire Red. I am planning on doing this in Pokemon Red, Blue, and or Yellow. This way I can get the full experience of it, but given the fact that there were 6 Pokemon given to me at random, and some of them turned out to be pretty solid, I can't complain. I can see this being an absolute pain using fully evolved Pokemon throughout the entire way, because let's be honest, fully evolved Pokemon are kind of bad in Pokemon Stadium because they wanted to balance out the BST with weaker moves overall. But that is our tier list. For starters, I'm going to place Charmander into B tier because until he learns Metal Claw, probably not going to be able to take out Brock. Then you've got Misty to deal with, and you've got Bruno to deal with, and Blaine. Squirtle, I'm going to place into the S tier, because Squirtle, I was able to beat it at a lower level than all of the others. And then Bulbasaur, I'm going to go ahead and place it into the A tier, because it is dependent a lot on Sleep Powder luck. But overall, I hope you enjoyed this video. Next week, I have a Nidoran video that I am hopefully planning on dropping, unless I get distracted by something else. But, as always, if you like the video, even if you didn't like the video, hit the like and subscribe button, because it really does help me out. And until next time, everybody, peace out.